Hey everyone, I am MSK, aka Master Swag King, coming at you guys today with another video. And in today's video, I am going to be talking about the past weekend at the worldwide box office, as Blue Beetle, the 14th installment in the DCEU, has been released, and its box office opening weekend number is extremely bad. Like I've mentioned in previous videos similar to this one, the DCEU as a franchise has been on the massive decline for a very long time. As I've said and stated many times before, it seems like the general audience and a lot of the fans have just given up on this universe for many reasons. Now, there are some key pieces of context that I want to bring up in this video before we start going over, Blue Beetle's opening weekend number at the worldwide box office, as well as covering the other movies that have been also doing well. So, Blue Beetle, like with Batgirl, was supposed to be a HBO Max exclusive streaming movie. So Batgirl, as you guys remember, ended up getting axed because the creatives thought it was just so bad to release, they just chose to just axe the entire thing. Whether that's a good or bad thing, that can be subjective, up to you, but that's what the situation is. After that, Blue Beetle ended up getting an increase in its budget, and then David Zaslav made the decision to have this movie be released theatrically worldwide. I thought that was the better decision, because there's no point in just putting out movies related to this property just straight to streaming. Obviously, because that would make you extremely less money on the product itself. So this movie ended up getting some good things for itself. An increase in its budget, and it also ended up getting a theatrical release. The other thing that ended up happening in this movie, which was not really the movie itself, it's just more like the movie inherently, from everything going on before it, was just kind of set up to fail, right? So you have the current writer's strike going on, so the talent involved, can't really promote the film. You guys know how you usually have that kind of like that red carpet kind of premiere for with a lot of these movies. That couldn't happen. You also had the Blue Beetle trailers, which I thought were, well, the second one being really bad. I thought the first one was otherwise not that bad. And then you had the line in it at the end of the first trailer where George Lopez is like, Batman's a fascist, and it's like, that just automatically would turn a whole bunch of people off from initially even checking out this movie. It's such a stupid line. I don't even know why that was even allowed in the film. And then you start reading about the things the director of the movie obviously was saying, and you could tell he's some freaking liberal NPC Democratic piece of shit, right? So you could tell there was so many things going against this movie, obviously, right? So, you also have this movie coming out after The Flash, which just ended its theatrical box office run, and that was extremely abysmal, actually. And that is a separate video I'm gonna do to this one, because that is just big enough for its own video in it of itself, actually. So, what we also didn't know at the time was, what was Blue Beetle's film budget, right? Because in order to judge if this movie flopped opening weekend and if it will flop in its entire theatrical run, you have to know the film's budget. Now, the marketing is going to be really weird with this film, because we don't know how much money they put into actually marketing the film before the writer's strike. I'd imagine it wasn't that much money, only because obviously around this time this movie was going to be coming out, everything had already pretty much shut down and went on strike. So the only good thing going for this movie is that, where like maybe the marketing budget was not as big as other big blockbuster tentpoles, obviously, that have been released. So then the budget came out, actually, and Blue Beetle's budget is $104 million. Keep in mind, remember, this was supposed to be a streaming exclusive movie for HBO Max at the time. So it says right here, the production budget for Blue Beetle amounted to a modest $104 million. In the usual scenario, a film must generate double its production budget to achieve a break-even point. Well, it's usually 2 to 3 times the film's budget, but that's fine. So as long as this movie essentially takes in about $300 to $400 million worldwide, that's actually pretty good. And if it has a really low marketing budget surrounding it, given the circumstances right now, That's also more in the film's benefit. But to get to that $400 million mark, it would have had to have started out really big for the most part, because the number that it started out with is extremely, extremely bad, to the point where if this film doesn't get any legs going in these upcoming weeks, this film's going to end up flopping itself too. And then there's another thing that I want to bring up, which is right here, where this one person had put this tweet out on Twitter, and it's kind of reminiscent about the audience that Marvel and DC want at this point, which is an audience that is broke as freak. They don't have any money. They obviously don't care about these characters the way you think you do, or the way that you and I would probably care about these characters. It's a whole lot of that, and it's also a lot of like trying to clamor for an audience that isn't there. They just don't really want to support these characters that way. And it's not just with that weird, cringe, disgusting audience. It's also the actual DC fans themselves, where they say they're going to support their movies, and they just don't. You know, they just don't do it at all. Remember when The Rock tried clamoring to all those DC fans that he was going to bring back, you know, Henry Cavill and all that stuff? Even they didn't support that. So, and you know, that meme that Grace Randolph tweeted was also true. Like, DC fans on Twitter, big, but you know, DC fans in real life, non-existent. And I do think there's a lot of DC fans in real life. I think there's a lot of fans of a lot of things in real life, whether casually or more hardcore into the actual, you know, product itself. But when it comes to actually putting up numbers for these movies, it doesn't happen for a lot of the DC movies now. And what is that? Is that general interest that's gone, or have people just resoundingly given up on this universe, pending on if you think that James Gunn's creative decisions have actually impacted that? Now, another thing to bring up is James Gunn himself did announce that slate before Shazam! Fury of the Gods, and a lot of people thought that that was a key piece in, you know, obviously tanking any excitement for these movies. Now, that's a weird twofold thing, because I'm not under the mindset that something has to continue to something for me to go and watch it. It's just more like, I could understand how that would matter to people. It's like, well, these movies aren't going to have a continuation, and we're already like, by the time we hit Aquaman and Lost Kingdom coming on December, this franchise will have ended at 15 movies. Well, if this isn't going to be an ongoing thing for some people, because this is kind of like weirdly reminiscent of like a franchise that is ongoing, like the MCU, then people are going to not feel like there's a need to initially support the film, right? But another thing here to bring up is trying to fully understand why these movies have not been performing as they are. And looking at the track record of the three, including this one, these movies that have come out before Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, it's looking like Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom is going to be a massive box office flop. And they have another problem in their movie production, which is Amber Heard, actually. So here's a quote from the Hollywood Reporter that this guy had captured, which is, DC official threatens the entire Latino community with representation in films. If they don't buy a ticket to their upcoming Latino-led superhero film Blue Beetle, this is made more disturbing when DC's past is brought into the same light. So here's the quote right here. If Blue Beetle flops, Latino community might see less representation in Hollywood. First of all, that's just not true. I don't really get this argument of there's been less representation for like black people or Mexicans or Chinese. Yeah, like the more obscure races that people don't generally think about. Yeah, I do believe on some sorts there have been less of them in media. But when you're talking about blacks and Mexican people, just that, because they've gotten a lot of stuff over the years, whether it be streaming movies, whether it be theatrically released movies, whether it be TV series, prominent TV series from these this type of communities as well. Animes, a lot of these guys are, for the English dubs, voice a lot of these popular characters as well, you know? And it's really weird how this representation thing has gotten so crazy to the point where, like, random cringy weirdos can't possibly watch a movie unless they identify with the person, and not because of your personality, your morals, if you're a good character, any of that actual stuff that matters. All that matters to these people is if you look the same way in terms of skin color, which is the dumbest fucking thing I have ever heard of in my life. That's a you problem. If you actually think that, you're a complete idiot and you need to actually rethink your life because you're actually fucking stupid. Now, keep in mind what I just said there. In order to actually like a movie, not because of its story, not because of its score, not because of anything else, it's because you yourself have to look like the main race of the main character or a character in the movie. That's fucking stupid. That is actually stupid. That means you like other popular IPs like Dragon Ball. Guess you can't like Goku then. Guess you can't like fucking Power Rangers. Well, it just had a bunch of different races of people there. Which actually has a diverse cast most of the time too. White, black, Hispanic, Asian, Puerto Rican, all that type of shit, right? Guess you can't like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Transformers, Sonic, all this other really great stuff that came out when we were younger, right? Stupid. Representation is stupid. It's a dumb thing to latch your movie on. How about you sell the actual story itself? How about you sell the movie itself in that? Who gives a actual flying fuck about representation when it's been done? And just because you've never heard of these properties, these TV shows, these movies, all that stuff, doesn't mean they don't exist, and you yourself would have to go and educate yourself on how this stuff came out and all the stuff that ended up coming out for these people actually. I just don't get it. And this is the thing is, that feels like such a hand-me-down thing to say, which is like the Latino community might see less representation. First of all, I don't believe that's going to be a truthful thing because it's not happened ever. Second of all, no one wants just hand-me-down shit thrown to them. Like you're some fucking just, hungry dog on the freaking street. Like no one wants that trash, So it's one of these things where what type of audience are they trying to get? Like, I don't know what type of audience they think they have, but that's not the audience you want. And second of all, that audience is broke as fuck, for being completely honest here. So let's start going over the actual number itself. So we know the context of the budget itself, and we'll just get a calculator right here. That way we can, we're being really generous here with, I don't know the marketing budget for Beetle, but we'll just do the budget. So that's fair for this movie. All right, 104 times, let's just do the base minimum times 2. The film has to at least about hit 208 million worldwide. Now remember, theaters take a lot of the cut, guys. It's roughly in the 50% range, right? So you're talking worldwide, it also means that you need to make an even bigger number, right? So let's do times 3, okay? 104 million times 3. They got to be hitting at least 312 million worldwide, not only to pretty much generate a profit past break-even point, as well as, giving that big cut to the theaters, right? And if you really want to make some profit, you'll be hitting about $350 to $400 million. This is also a low number, but the movie's budget kind of basically initiates that it needs to make a minimum number like that to do very well, okay? So we know the film's budget. Now let's go and talk about the other part of it, okay? Blue Beetle, what the freak? Oh, sorry, the article was buggy. Blue Beetle has dethroned Barbie at the domestic box office. The latest DC superhero adventure claimed the #1 spot despite a softer than expected debut at 25.4 million. That's extremely bad, okay? Now, if the movie, let's say, gets a double in its increase, which is what this movie could do, because remember, like, numbers don't really get, like, super totaled, maybe to, like, Mondays or Tuesday of the following week, but that is extremely bad right there. And to be fair, in this movie's case, it literally just came out, but when you see a number like that, movies sometimes do not recover from this kind of bad starts. I mean, BVS famously didn't recover. This movie, I think, had an even softer opening than Morbius, and other bad DC movies that ended up just flopping at the box office, like Shazam! Fear of the Gods, and movies like that. At the international box office, Blue Beetle, starring Xolo Maridueña as the alien symbiote, added 18 million from 63 markets. With 43 million globally, it's one of the softest starts in the history of the DC Cinematic Universe. That's really bad. Oh, 25 million? Wow, that's crazy. After 4 consecutive weekends in first place, Barbie landed on her feet at second place with 21.5 million from 4,003 theaters, a huge result at the point in its theatrical run. After 5 weeks of release, Greta Gerwig's fantasy comedy has generated 567 million and will soon overtake Universal's animated The Super Mario Bros. Movie, 574 million as the biggest domestic release of the year. Yeah, Barbie just continues to break records even though it's hitting second place right now. Blue Beetle cost more than $100 million to produce and many millions to promote, so it'll need to defy the box office odds to justify its price tag. Reviews and word of mouth may not do much to fill seats. The film has a B+ cinema score and a 77% on Rotten Tomatoes. In a note to press, Warner Brothers suggested the impact of Tropical Storm Hilary is anticipated to be significant, particularly in Southern California, where the film is over-indexing. That's just come on, that's just an excuse. I mean, it just, Lord, that's just an excuse. I don't know why. I know other trades have been blaming, the recent, storms on this. That is the biggest crock of shit that I've ever heard. Really? You're blaming storms the reason why this movie couldn't perform? That's so bad. That is so bad, okay? But you also still have other bigger markets in this country too, without storms going on right now, where the film could perform. That's just a huge crock of shit right there. It's the third DC film in 2023 to tumble out of the gate after Shazam! Fury of the Gods, $30.1 million in March, and The Flash, $55 million in June. Even 2021's The Suicide Squad, which debuted simultaneously in theaters and on HBO Max, enjoyed a bigger start with $26.2 million. But that film, as well as Shazam 2 and The Flash, which flopped in their theatrical runs, were based on higher profile characters compared to Blue Beetle. Directed by Angel Manuel Soto, the film centers on a college graduate, Jaime Reyes, who gets chosen to become a symbiotic host to an ancient alien biotech relic that turns him into the superhero known as Blue Beetle, a fourth DC adaptation. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom is slated to release in December before the studio's new chiefs, James Gunn and Peter Safran, take the faltering comic book universe in an entirely new direction. And that's a good thing. This universe needs an entirely new direction. Also, what it feels like with these last four films, even if James Gunn didn't get a chance to take over, this just feels like there's no direction here in this universe at all. This is absolutely just purely disgusting. After a dozen nearly flawless years, the comic book genre has performed unevenly during the last 3.5 years, which would pretty much imply that there's superhero fatigue going on. We're going to know more about superheroes in November and December, he adds in reference to Aquaman 2, as well as Disney's sequel, The Marvels, on November 10th. Those two films will determine the state of superheroes in 2023 and going forward. That is, I do agree with that sentiment because these two are the last big DC and Marvel movies of the year, and there's huge budgets attached to these movies. And like I always mentioned before, when you have huge budgets attached to these movies, they have to perform well. There isn't like a if, ands, ors, or buts scenario. This is just the way it has to be. Universal's talking dog comedy Strays also stumbled in its debut, digging up a paltry $8.3 million from 3,223 theaters for a fifth-place finish. The R-rated movie cost $46 million and could struggle overseas, where funny films tend to have limited appeal. It flopped at the international box office with $1.9 million from 21 territories for a global tally of $10 million. Yes, Strays, that is an even more bigger flop than Blue Beetle. $46 million budget, not counting marketing, and it opened to $8.3 million. That is absolutely abysmal. That is absolutely crazy. This is a soft opening. That's putting it really lightly. That is an abysmal opening. Theatrical comedies are a rare breed in Hollywood these days, and even with the starry voice cast of Will Ferrell and Jamie Foxx, Strays fared far worse than Jennifer Lawrence's raunchy No Hard Feelings, $15 million, and Universal's drug-fueled Cocaine Bear, at $23 million. It barely beat Bert Kreischer's stand-up inspired The Machine, which crumbled with $5 million. Strays landed behind two holdovers, Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer and Paramount's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem. Oppenheimer took third place with 11 million in its fifth weekend of release, bringing ticket sales to 286 million. The R-rated historical drama crossed 700 million at the global box office over the weekend, surpassing 2014's Interstellar, 714 million, to stand as Nolan's fourth highest grossing movie. It's the fourth biggest release of the year, behind the Super Mario Bros. Movie, 1.35 billion. Barbie, 1.27 billion, and Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 at 845 million. Paramount's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem landed at the number 4 spot with 8.4 million from 3,477 venues after 3 weeks on the big screen. The animated family comedy has grossed 88.1 million in North America and 30 million internationally. It cost 70 million to make and will end up as a modest box office performer. So, yeah, because that is also going to be a hard one too. Because I think the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle movie, it has to at least hit about, like for me, that's got to, because when you're adding to marketing, that's got to hit at least like 2, 3 something too, so I don't know if it's going to hit that number. It's looking like it's not, but that's going to be one of those like barely break even movies, if we're being completely honest here. So this is talking about the re-release. So basically they re-released a 2003 movie, which did well, obviously. And right here we have elsewhere, Meg 2, The Trench, swam past the $300 million mark with worldwide ticket sales at 316.6 million. A majority of those returns are coming from international territories, where the Shark sequel has grossed 250 million. That is incredible. The Meg 2, The Trench outgrossed The Flash. Crazy. What a world we live now, where like a movie about a giant shark can outgross a superhero character as popular as The Flash. Crazy. The follow-up isn't living up to its predecessor, 2018's The Meg, which earned 145 million in North America and 529 million globally at the domestic box office. Especially The Trench has been shark bait in wake of Barbie and Oppenheimer. Yeah, Barbie and Oppenheimer have just completely destroyed and shattered all the expectations, surrounding, the box office in general, right? But yeah, that's it for this past weekend at the worldwide box office. I know you guys like these videos, and I do want to make sure I say this right here, because I know you guys watch these videos, is there's going to be more consistent content coming up. Basically, it got to a point where I literally recorded a lot of videos, and then by the time I was on like my second to last video, I just didn't have enough time to record more videos in advance, because you guys know I record a lot of videos in advance. That way I can release them to you guys, in a concession, like a consistent stream to you guys, right? But I kind of let it go to a point where I had nothing else to release, so had to kind of, build up some content to release to you guys. And I know a lot of people are probably going to be like, well, you should have went over the Flash news in this, because it kind of counts as the box office. And yes, it does, but I think should do it as a separate video, because there's things that I separately want to bring up from this movie compared to that one, and that video will be out in due time. But thank you guys for your support. I am MSK, and this is Online Cinema Entertainment, your one place for online cinema. All right, see you guys later. Deuces. Peace.